Hi everyone, and welcome to another episode of Get Cooked. My name's Sarah Cook, and each week I've been interviewing members of our rowing community both here and in Australia and overseas. And this week I have another triple threat for you. I'm very excited to introduce Guin Batten, Hannah Every-Hall, and of course Rillio Rio Rii from Vanuatu. We'll go into some of your amazing achievements very soon and throughout the interview. I don't want to create any spoilers from the beginning, but let's go to you first, Guin. I think the question on everyone's lips is, what is coastal rowing? So can you tell us a bit about exactly what coastal rowing is and the different disciplines that's involved?
So coastal rowing is, as we see it from world rowing, as in the terms of the competitive side of things, it's a type of boat that is controlled by four measurements: maximum weight, or should I say minimum weight, the width, the length, and then there's another subtle measurement in there which is about stability. So in essence, the boats themselves are designed for really big conditions. They're designed for real agility going around turns, and the real fundamental bit is to bring all the communities of rowing that row on the sea into one boat type so that they can race against each other at a global level. What formats fall out of that? Well, there's basically three formats, and they've evolved over time. One of those is the beach sprint. Really exciting, probably the newest of the three. There's the enduro format, the endurance format, and that's the grandfather format in many ways. And then there's a touring format. It's not really competitive, but it's a sense of journeying. I mean, I make it competitive because I'm racing against the clock when I do my touring and journeying. But there are three great ways of using what is a really versatile design of boats. If you want to give it an analogy, 2000 classic rowing, flat watering, whatever you want to call it, it's a little bit like the track cycling, where they've got these really high performance single speed bikes and they just fly around the track with huge amounts of training and fitness with it. If you think about the coastal side, it's all about tactics, agility, direct navigation. There's so many elements to it. And it's a bit like the mountain biking, where you've got your downhill and your endurance, and then you've got your bike packers now and things like that. So there you go. That's my analogy. That.
Yeah, I love that analogy. And in explaining this sport to people as well, I've often referred to it as like rowing and sailing, which are two of my loves, and I know two of yours, Guin, have had a baby, and coastal rowing came out of it because it really brings in a lot of those elements from sailing, wind, swell, tide, mark roundings. So it's a very exciting and I guess a little bit lucky discipline as compared to maybe flat water rowing, like you say, a much more controlled environment.
Yeah, that was a lovely saying on a video. If you go back and look at some of the videos, someone said in flat water rowing, you can be intelligent, but nobody cares. In coastal rowing, it helps. So yeah, it's exactly like you said. It's like they've had a baby. I also think there's a little bit of that knowledge around the shore break area as well. So while the coastal boats are not great in surf, because their sterns and their bows are much more like ocean going, the offshore racing boats. They've got a very flat stern and a wave piercing bow, but that knowledge around the shore break area is helpful as well.
And that's actually, you've just reminded me, is an area that I think people get a bit confused about, is surf boat rowing, which of course those boats love swell, and you see them going out through huge waves off Manly Beach and things like that here in Australia. But coastal rowing, we don't really like those big waves and those big swells, do we?
Yeah, not at all. So what the coastal boats love is green swell. Really, I've been out in 4-meter green swell surfing down the front. They love those. But what they don't like is when it starts to break. The reason why they don't like is there is nothing on the boat that can grip the water. So because the boats are relatively short and designed for this agility around the cans, you have to be very skillful to hold the directional stability of those boats as they come down a braking face. And they have a tendency of doing the old, with the wave piercing bow of digging deep and doing a few somersaults. So avoid
a bit of a nosedive into the beach. um,
But you know, if you were to say what is the ultimate wave for a coastal design, it's a big, deep, long green wave, kilometre offshore, and you can run them for. I mean, 1 minute you're at, you know, cruising along at 22 strokes per minute, and the next minute you're at 54, just trying to keep yourself straight, hurtling along at 12 knots. You know, and it can change in 2 strokes, and it's amazing to be part of that.
Wow, and we'll hear a bit more about some of your touring and some of those experiences a bit later on. But before we move on to Rio, Guin, I just want to let everyone know and maybe remind you that it's been 20 years next month since you were here in Australia competing as a flat water rower, winning your silver medal at the Olympic Games for Great Britain. I mean, can you tell us a little bit about that experience and some of your memories of Australia and your connections to Australia?
Yeah. Absolutely. So we sort of felt like we'd adopted Australia in the 3 or 4 years running up to Sydney. And, you know, we had everything changed in those years for us as Great Britain at that time. Lottery funding came in. We started to get some really great coaches. And so it all started everything seemed to start to align. And it was really wonderful being part of the first ever Olympic medal for Great Britain's women. You know, it was the beginning. We'd always only ever come fifth, almost to the point where, you know, I can imagine all the countries on the start line of the Olympic final looking across and seeing Great Britain, and they go, oh, they'll come fifth. Because we'd come fifth in Los Angeles, we'd come fifth in Barcelona, we'd had a fifth in, so do you know what I mean? I mean, literally, we'd had this. And then what we did was in 2000 in Sydney, we took ourselves up and we ended up on this silver. So I think for the next 3 Olympics, we got silvers until, of course, in 2012, where the women's squad came home with 3 golds, which was pretty cool.
Yeah, it was absolutely incredible, and the start, like you say, of a huge amount of success over just over a decade for the British women. In fact, more than that, almost 2 decades now. But moving on to Rio, last year you competed at the World Rowing Beach Sprint Finals in Shenzhen in China, and then you competed in the World Rowing Coastal Championships in Hong Kong. Can you tell us a little bit about what it was like to compete at the first ever beach sprint finals and your experiences last year?
Okay, the beach sprint and everything, the coastal rowing is new to me, very new. But either way, we have the rough water here, but yeah, I tried the beach sprint is very different from what I'm doing here. We have long beaches here, but I never get on the boat, just sprint up the ending line. No, but it was fun because yeah, run for 15 minutes down the good sandy beach and then open a boat and just go out like either you're a good rower or not, but the wave and the water will tell you if you're good or not. And then the Hong Kong, it was another step with I've never seen in a big harbor and stuff. When out in just big boats is coming by and the waves is coming to me, and I was like, oh, that was different. And the big waves, all my calling was like, ee-hoo, and splashed everywhere. Yeah, that was fun. That was really fun. It's new to me, and I liked it. I liked it till more than yeah. It's fun because still water is very hard to train for. But coastal rowing is like I can train for only 4 to 5 times then the still water that you had to just keep on going, keeping burning. So it's very new and I liked it. Coastal rowing and the beach sprint is next level to me.
Yeah, and like you say, in Hong Kong, it was amazing. Some of the vision that we got, I was over there commentating and seeing these huge ferries come up into the screen was unbelievable. And it was a really tricky environment. And even with the walls down the side of the course and the wash bouncing off, it was like a washing machine out there some days.
Very good.
And you do quite a bit of training here in Australia. I know that you've had some support from Rowing Australia, and you do some training up in Queensland with Ben Southwell and some of his squad at the Queensland Academy of Sport. How's that been?
Oh, back in Vanuatu, I train alone. So when I go up to Australia, it's like me and the young squad they were like they push every time, they go hard every time. So when I went there, it's like moving me up another level with them. So the first day I went there, I was like, oh, I'm coming behind, and then to the middle of I went there 3 months. To the second month, I was like, oh, he's keeping up with the. And then the third, I was like going with the boys, just doing every session every day, doing the rowing. And I went to Gold Coast to train with other squad up in Gold Coast, and then back down in Queensland again. And before the month end, before the case of coronavirus, as you know, I just came back to Vanuatu. Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. So you made it out just in time.
Just in time. Yeah.
Now, Hannah, you are an Olympic lightweight rower. You competed for Australia at the 2012 Olympic Games, but you also competed at the 2019 World Rowing Coastal Championships as a coxswain. Now, can you tell us how that came about?
Yeah, that was very spontaneous, and it just came around by chance. And I think the coastal community, I think because it is new and the nature of the athletes, it is a really close community. So everybody talks to everyone from every nation. So it's different to the flat water where the countries keep to themselves, and it's a wonderful environment to be in. And consequently, I found these 4 gentlemen, and you could tell they're Australian from a mile off, from Tasmania, from Lindisfarne. And we got chatting, and then they mentioned that their coxswain that they had planned had come down with the flu and was very unwell. And then they sort of joked around, as good Aussies do, saying, you could jump in and cox. And I said, oh, no, I don't think I'll be allowed to. And then they worked hard to try and find a coxswain and couldn't find another alternative. So I ended up taking the steering seat.
And how was that experience?
It was fantastic, actually. I loved it. I thought it was exhilarating, fun, competitive, adrenaline pumping. So sort of like Rio mentioned, you just don't know what's going to happen. And you mentioned also some of the vision that came out of it. I think some of my favourite vision was the ferry that went across, and you got the vision straight through. So you saw some boats on one side of the ferry, other boats that were trying to get to the other side of the ferry, and then a whole collection around the can just all crashing into each other. So, it was so exciting the whole time, whether you're in the start, middle, or back of the group. It's fun.
Yeah, there was an amazing shot, talking of shots from Hong Kong, it was an amazing drone shot of the chicane. So the chicane was was towards the end of the to the end of the loop, and the guys, so basically you go one way, you go the next way, and you go the next way. So it was 3 turns, one after the other. There was a drone shot, and I think it was the men's quad, it could have been the women's quads, and there were 5 quads, and they're passing within millimeters of their bows. And you're talking, these boats are 130 kilos without the people in them. Put the people in, and the precision, just phenomenal. The coxswain and also the crew's ability to speed up and slow down, because actually we don't have brakes on rowing boats, so that agility is just amazing, and it was just skill, and it was really exciting to watch as well.
I think that's the extra part too, sort of, that you mentioned. How I found it is, it's the extra tactics and the extra, as you mentioned, the sailing component, even the starting system, the 3-minute countdown, watching the balls drop on the boat, listening to the countdown, timing the corners, judging what other boats are sort of going to do, and how you're going to sort of put yourself in the best position, where the swell's coming from, and all of those things, add up as you go along. So, it was really exciting.
I mean, there was a really good, sorry to
that's what really,
there was a really, in the
no,
men's,
you're right.
men's final of the double. Rio, you were in it, and basically, because the first buoy is about 1 kilometer off the start line, and the risk of collision round the first turning point is massive, and you've got to get a clean first turn. If you don't get a clean first turn, you get caught up in a couple of boats, you're going to lose 30 seconds. That's game over unless you're exquisitely quick. And so honestly, it was a 1 kilometer sprint to that first, for that first mark. Ria, how was it for you? You guys went so quick on that first kilometer.
Yeah, me and Luigi, we had our first start, like hitting it, going through the waves, steering a boat where the waves is getting us going. And then suddenly, on the our turn, we had I think the Germans collapsed us. So we got stuck. And then we saw everyone just come by us. It was like, oh no! And then we had to get back to where we had. And then we, just because of wave and stuff, coastal rowing, which is very hard to catch up. Yeah,
it is really hard because we have so many following boats following the races. If you get too far behind the field, it's really hard to come back because of the washes of the motorboats. So therefore, the key to being in the first set of crews is massively important. So a bit more like cycling again. Got to get in the front pack.
Yeah, it really reminds me. There's so many elements of dinghy sailing, and I mean, this is kind of where it eventuated, isn't it? Or sorry, started was in France, and they go out and lay their trapezoid course, which we use in dinghy sailing, row around that in the morning, and then take their sailing boats out around in the afternoon. And those elements, like you mentioned, Hannah, the time on distance into the start and into the mark roundings, the being able to read the race as it's going, understand the swell and the tide in terms of picking your lines to get to the marks and the course. So there's so many different elements that make it really exciting, but also you can get really unlucky, people crashing into you, copping a bad wash, like you're saying, Guin. It just turns into a washing machine once all those boats go past. So it really is, I think there's so many exciting elements to this discipline, which, yeah, can be unlucky sometimes, but it's also part of the fun, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, Guin, you are the chair of the Rowing for All Commission at FISA. Can you tell us a little bit about the development of the sport of rowing, I guess, globally, and particularly how the coastal rowing disciplines fit into that, and where we're headed with the sport?
Yeah, so you're right. So as a discipline, it emerged out in the late 80s out of France. The French do this really well. They get themselves organised, and they've done it really well in sailing, and they've done it, offshore stuff as well. It's just brilliant how they do it. And we inherited, the rest of the world really inherited their discipline of coastal. And what they were finding was that many of their rowing clubs are on the coast. And they started to look towards flat water, which meant that they could really only train at silly times in the day or on really calm days. And I think they were finding their membership of their rowing was dropping. And so they really wanted to drive the coastal side. They came up with these measurements, and we started. We did a test event in the Channel Islands, in the around the middle of the noughties, and then the first World Championships was hosted in Cannes, and we always have our biggest entry when we're on the Mediterranean at our World Coastal Championships.
I can't understand why.
Yeah, sure. And we've had up to 800 competitors at a World Coastal Championships. It's a big event. It's really exciting. You get a real mixture because, again, without the significant amount of funding that comes into the Olympics, it is funded by the clubs and it's funded by the individuals that go. So we have a real age range and ability range. And the two other countries that really helped drive this is Italy and Spain. They continue to be the real monster countries as far as coastal rowing concerned. Remain Italy, France, and Spain. They win the World Trophy most years between them. But what we started to feel, what we started to pick up was this gradual lifting of the sport. I think in about 2015, we started to see beach games emerging, so multi-sport events. And at the time we were trying to create, how do we make this really exciting event, which we have as coastal, which everyone gets into the boat on our dock, disappears off, and 25 minutes later they all come back and they've all got smiles on, and all the spectators are going, well, what happened? So we started to try and see, well, what elements can we bring ashore so that sponsors, TV and everything can get much more involved. And we were actually trying to find a beginner's version, and we came up with the beach sprint concept, the team on the Rowing for All Commission, and managed to get it into the Mediterranean Beach Games, the Asian Beach Games in Da Nang. Last year it was back in the Mediterranean Beach Games. We've had the African Beach Games. I know there was a format of the beach sprint down in South America. So it's just starting to travel out and travel across. And I know from the Commonwealth perspective, which of course is where Rio's current Commonwealth sprint champion at the moment. And, the Commonwealth really, because there's so many small island nations. And if you're a nation that doesn't have a 2,000 meter course, you don't necessarily have the water that you can put these Formula One boats on, this is a great second option. And it's starting to get a life of its own. So I think we're on our 14th or 14th World Coastal Championships. And what we've done is last year we had our first ever World Rowing Beach Sprint Finals. We haven't called it a championships, even though it has a championships component to it. The aim is that what we'll have underneath it when the sport grows is that we'll have continental and regional feeders that then take the very best from the continents together to come together for a finals. Hence why there's a slightly different name to it. COVID's put a bit of a blocker on this year's World Coastal Champions and World Beach Finals, which were due to be in Portugal, but we've been able to bump them forward. So that's really exciting. So long and the short of it, it's starting to grow all around the world. And, I think in Australia, you've got a few boats in Australia. There's a few boats out in New Zealand. So watch this space.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm actually the chair of the Rowing Australia Coastal Rowing Working Group, and we're currently putting together a strategic plan around what not just the introduction, because we do have a bit of coastal rowing here, but really the growth of that discipline into mainstream rowing sort of looks like over the next few years. And I guess we have some pretty lofty ambitions for where this discipline can head, but we'll talk about that a bit later. Rio, you've competed and trained in both flat water and coastal rowing. You were talking about your experience training up in Queensland on flat water earlier this year. Can you tell us some of the main differences from your perspective between flat water and coastal rowing?
So here in Vanuatu, I row in like sea, but inside the lagoon, which is quiet water. But in Australia is a river that moves. So it's kind of different from here back home. So in Australia, when I go down, I just follow the waves down or tide down. But coming back up, oh my God. Yeah, you have to like keep everything you have to coming back. So it's three different things for me, yeah. So the water and here back home. So now back home I get used to this water, so it's good for me. But when I go back, it's like I have to step up to go with the water in Australia, the main river in Brisbane. So I'm talking about, yeah. So it's different perspective, everything together. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah, the Brisbane River is pretty wild. I've done some rowing sessions on there myself, and it can be a bit hairy at sometimes.
Yeah.
And for you, what do you like better, flat water rowing or coastal rowing?
So now I'm still training at the flat water rowing, and but I would like to coastal again, because like water rowing is like, oh, you have to do everything. You have to do erg, you have to do and sessions every day, double sessions. But the coastal is like you can do all this, but you just have to limit the times your trainings, because you going with waves or not. In coastal, you just go with the waves that helps you, and the still water, no, nothing helps you.
Nothing helps. It's just
Nothing helps
hard.
you. Just you and the
Yeah.
boat. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think what you raise is an interesting point, that in coastal rowing, that you've got all of these other elements that we've been talking about that are
Yeah.
important. It's not just rowing, it's not just rowing hard. There's these other aspects that you really have to practice and understand. And do you feel that, I guess, rowing in Vanuatu and not being on a river and not being on a necessarily a flat water venue, do you think that you get more exposure and more training to coastal rowing conditions?
Oh well, here I think coastal now, like I just row in flat water now. There's no
Okay.
water coastal here, so but maybe we're trying, because the other side of the island there's rough sea and stuff, so maybe coastal there. Maybe we wait for some boats. Yeah.
Yes, definitely. Well, once you get your coastal boats over there, you'll have to head to the other side of the island
Yeah.
and take them out in the waves and see how they go.
Yeah, some waves.
Yes, absolutely. Now, Hannah, you are a member of the FISA Athletes Commission. What do you and the Athletes Commission see as some of the opportunities for this discipline and its growth?
Yeah, I think Gwen and you have at different times through the conversation have addressed some of those things. You know, the accessibility of the sport to a broader range of people, not having to have 2,000 meters. You know, whether it's beach sprint and beach sprint, so you only need a short amount of area, or whether it's the coastal and it's you know, a bigger area but can be contained. You don't need a purpose-built course. I think with the Olympic movement, the way it's going and adding sort of diversity and keeping the sport current is a huge plus. You know, kind of like what we saw, as Gwyn pointed out, mountain biking or BMX, what is to the ICU, you know, coastal is really to FISA and world rowing. So, and also the cost of the equipment. You know, again, Gwyn pointed out our Formula One vehicles that we park on these 2,000 metre purpose-built courses. You know, the equipment is far more accessible and far more affordable for far more people. So, you know, there's so many aspects that is exciting to, you know, the FISA Athletes Commission and FISA.
Yeah, so if I would butt in again, and I'm so sorry to butt in, but I think there is something
okay,
about
by the way.
Apologetic as ever. There's something about the equipment, you know, if you can, the way the stateroom, I don't know whether you call it the stateroom, but, you know, the seat to feet and the span, the dimensions that the rower sits in, they're identical. So there is nothing to stop you waking up one morning as an athlete and saying, it's too rough, I'm going to go out in my coastal single as opposed to my fine single. Now, the only bit will be the feel of the water and how the boat moves and the steerage. So it's a bit of the reaction of the boat, but those dimensions and everything are exactly the same. The rigidity is there as well. And if you often get boats which aren't necessarily racing boats, but they're on the sea, they're quite soft. These ones are high performance and stiffness in that way. But because they're wider, and if I was a beginner and I was coming into the coastal boat, I can get in it in half an hour, I could be racing, Whereas with the fine boats, with the river boats, really to race properly, you need about 2 years to be able to get your blades off the water and things like that. So there are some really good accessible things about it. There's some really good transferable things about it. I've got one in the garden. I've got my double scull in the garden, and I've landed on a full come straight. It was really rough. I've landed in we call it shingle, round rocks. Yeah, and I've come straight ashore on the round rocks in a boat because we had to get off because the weather was picking up. And I had one chip in the stern. It was amazing. They're tough as old boots. So they're great and ideal for club environments where you're sharing a boat. So if you come to the beach sprint championships, you don't bring your own boat. You'll fly around the world with your blades, and you just turn up with your blades, get in the boat, and everyone's in match boats and they're racing each other. So again, an environmental perspective, we're not having to ship these boats or boats from all the countries to the world just to that race venue.
And with that too, Gwen, is the equity of it all. So you don't have, the disparity in boats that you can have in that world rowing environment. Like when everybody shares the same boat and has exactly the same equipment, it is, equal.
Yeah, lots of, I think, really exciting elements to this discipline, and certainly seeing how that might evolve into perhaps even an Olympic discipline in the near future will be interesting as well, but more on that a bit later. But Guin, can you tell us about, you mentioned the touring aspect a little bit earlier, and that doesn't have to be competitive, but of course, knowing you, it is competitive. Can you tell us about your row around the UK and how that came about, and perhaps some of the highlights and lowlights of that trip?
Highlights and lowlights. There's always lowlights. So I got to the point where I'm the wrong side of 50 now, even though I try very hard not to look like that. But one of the things is, and also I enjoyed racing, but you do need to be incredibly fit. And what I was trying to work out is, how do we make more? How do I see the best way to see the coastline is from the sea? It looks so much better than if you're looking out from the land. And what I found with I was doing quite a lot of outrigger canoeing, and we did races in Hawaii, and we're doing water changes, and it was really cool. And I was thinking, that's brilliant, but these boats are so slow in comparison to a rowing boat. And so I got a coastal double, and I trained up a group of women. So there's about 10 of us, and half of them are from the coastal community, so they row every day on the sea, and the other half are the fine riverboat rowers, so they're super fit and incredibly strong, and their technique is brilliant. And I merged the two together, and we now call ourselves the Blisterhood. And the reason why we call ourselves the Blisterhood is that when we row, we have to row really hard, and we might row from 4 a.m. to 10 at night, and the blisters really do come on. And what we aim to do is, I call it almost like raid rowing, but we aim to go around some of the most extreme headlands that there are in Britain and in Ireland. Last year we were in Ireland, and what we have to do is work really carefully with the tides and the wind and the weather opportunities. There's always windows, and what we'll do is I'll try and keep the boat running for as long as possible. So we've got a minibus or a motorboat following, depending on where we are, and 2 people will get in the boat, 2 people will get out, and we just keep rolling the boat and travel as quickly as we can. And it's exquisite. I mean, we've been to some amazing places. Where I don't know whether you know, there's a place called Land's End, right at the end of Great Britain, and it's notorious. I mean, the waves are notorious. Basically, the waves just come straight across the Atlantic and hit the cliffs as they come in. But on the right day, with the right tide, you pop your rowing boat in, and there you are rowing, and you just cliffs on either side, and you've still got that really big, deep swell coming in off the Atlantic. And I mean, when we did it, we put our boat in at about 6:30. The tide turned. It was lovely and sunny. There wasn't much wind, overtaking all the yachts as we came round. flip round the corner, come into this lovely sandy beach called Port Kono. You know, it's only 50 meters wide. Popped into the beach, everyone's there with the buckets and spades, and we slip the boat in, change the crew over, and then they go off another, you know, 10 kilometers down. And so we just do this, and it's something really special about the slight fear of going out and then being welcomed back and going on. But then, like anything, if you're going to the extreme places, you need to be really prepared. I mean, I got here is, these are the route plan books that we put together with all of the charts and because the vehicle's got to come down and then everything. So we really prepared in that space. But you're always going to get caught on the beach. I mean, you were saying time when it wasn't so brilliant. We got caught on a beach called Camber Sands, which is you know, lovely long miles and miles of sandy beach. Kite surfers love it. But the problem with the beach is, of course, the surf break. And, you know, we had to wait, I think it was about 7 or 8 hours sitting in the van on the beach waiting for the surf to come down before we could get out. So, yeah, so there's some really cool bits to it, but you also have to be patient and wait for the weather. So, yeah.
Well, maybe if you do like the Pacific Islands or something, I'll join the Blisterhood.
Yeah, join the Blisterhood. So I did the Maldives. So there's a channel in the Maldives.
If you do that again, I'll come.
yeah. Well, we did a tour there 2 years in a trot. But there's a channel called the 0 Degree Channel. It crosses the equator. It's about 70 kilometers of open water. So you come straight out of the atoll, drops down and away for about the seabed's 3 kilometers deep. And you've got nothing but deep ocean until you find this little atoll, about 70 kilometers. And I did that in 2013 or 2010 in a single scull. I shipped a single scull out and did that. And that took me 7 hours. That was quite painful. I left in the night because I was a bit worried about the heat. But, you know, 6 months later, we wanted to go out and do it in a quad. But we just didn't have the weather window. You know, I mean, the waves were massive. We were going off the front of the waves. So, but it's just a beautiful way to be on the sea. It
is amazing, some of these experiences. I mean, some of them you're selling, some of them not so much, but it does sound absolutely incredible. And Rio, in 2018, you competed at the first ever Commonwealth Beach Sprint Regatta in the UK, which Gwen mentioned a little bit earlier, and you won Vanuatu's first ever Commonwealth gold medal in any sport. Can you tell us about that experience and I guess what that meant for Vanuatu as well?
Yeah, so it was in Sandbanks, yeah, and it's for going for that cold. It was like I don't know where I'm going. I'm just like, oh, next race. Yeah, because it's fun and I forgot where I'm at. But in the end, suddenly I stepped on the first place, the first place to receive the code. I was shocked. I was like, oh, this is the code. Yeah, so it's because I was just thinking it's just fun and doing it, just racing against other rowers. And yeah, it was very different and touching for me because yeah, just to put my little island, the Vanuatu, in a spot of light. So yeah, so when I came back, it was like everybody to lift me up and walk with me. It was oh my god, yeah. So it was a good experience getting a gold for my country, and they are proud, and I am proud. Yeah.
It's amazing. It's better than a good experience. I think it's a pretty exceptional experience, and yeah, absolutely incredible. And you're coached by an Australian, aren't you, Andrew Mackenzie?
Yeah, Andrew Mackenzie. He's a good coach. He always coached me. Yeah, I'm going to see him tomorrow again. So trainings never stop. So I'm currently training for the Olympic. Maybe when. The Olympics, so now to move it on. So I'm starting training again for another year again for the Olympics.
Yeah. How are you feeling with the Olympics being postponed? by a year. Is that good for you, bad for you? How do you feel about it?
I just feel like, oh no, another year. Yeah, another year of blister training. Yeah, but it's good. It's good keeping me healthy and discipline myself till the next year again. Yeah.
Well, we wish you all the very best for your preparations for Tokyo. And are you planning on going to the Coastal Championships in Portugal in October next year?
Yeah, for sure, definitely. Definitely.
Me too.
Yeah.
Well, we wish
Yeah.
you all the very best with your preparations and your training leading into those regattas in just over a year's time. And fingers crossed everything happens next year. And I think it'll be a great celebration for the world to see those events go ahead, particularly the Olympic Games. So we wish you the very best of luck.
Thank you. Thank you. Feeling sad because I'm not traveling.
And Hannah, I know, I feel sad too.
Yeah.
Yeah, looking forward to this being over. Now, Hannah, you had the opportunity to do some coastal rowing in a double recently, obviously before Victoria went into lockdown. What do you hope to see, I guess, in terms of development of this discipline in Australia, but also internationally?
Yeah, I was very fortunate. A friend of mine has just purchased a coastal double, and so I've been talking to him for ages, going, he's got it down at Anglesey. So I went down with the family, and we, all had a row. So I think that was, to Gwen's point earlier, is that you can put anybody in it, and it opens up so many doors. So, I think that's what I hope for the sport, is that, traditionally rowing has been a sport that is hard to access. You either in Australia, private school, or fortunate enough to be able to get into a rowing club, but often that doesn't happen till later on. So I think the accessibility and bringing a whole another population and a whole community to our sport that we all love in just a slightly different discipline just opens up so many doors. So for me, that's what I hope, is that it does bring a whole nother population, and we may see cross-pollination, people that were brought into the sport through coastal rowing sort of moving to flat water, and vice versa. But I think also, which is exciting, is there's no perfect physique, I don't think, for coastal. For flat water rowing, we know if you've got long arms and you're tall and long legs and short torso in relative, those sort of things really help. But in coastal, depending on the weather conditions, can change, whether you want someone heavy or light, or tactical things as well. But I think in that touring aspect as well, it's a way that people can access this sport that we know is fantastic for the whole body. You can exercise every part of the whole body. It's non-weight bearing essentially. So it's there's just so many fantastic attributes to this other dimension of rowing that I think is what I hope to see it grow here in Australia.
I completely agree. Some great points there, Han. And Guin, the World Rowing Coastal Championships and Beach Sprint finals were due to be in Oeiras, Portugal later this year, which I think pretty much on this call we're hoping to be at. They've obviously been postponed to next year, which is great. We'll still get to go to Portugal, which I'm very much looking forward to. And excitingly, the beach sprints have been incorporated in what is now the 2026 Youth Olympic Games in Dakar. Do you think that we're going to see this discipline in an Olympic Games not too far away?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a really timely question. The challenge that the IOC and have set sports, and the way they've taken the new norm and things like this, and now it really is a new normal with coming forward with us as we come out of COVID. How does the sport evolve but still hold on to the roots, still hold on to the things that are immensely important to us as a sport? And the challenge we had was we were not able to keep lightweights into the Olympic Games. And one of the by working very closely Jean-Christophe and the executive team and our rowing IOC community members, they, we started to see, well, what was the alternative? If we want to keep the numbers and we want to have inclusive accessibility, especially for small island nations or nations that aren't as potentially as affluent or as well funded, how do we help people that are, as you say, aren't got long levers and can generate that level of force over that, for the 2,000 meter race. And it started, the bits of the puzzle started to come together. And I think the key bit of what Hannah was saying is there doesn't seem to be a typical type of body type that's doing this. And remember that the boats are pool boats. So therefore, a bit like in sailing, the laser suits a certain weight, the radial suits another weight. There is probably a weight bracket that fits the pool boats. So again, if you if you're 110 kilos, the boat does look a little bit like a toy boat when you're rowing in it. So there is certainly an opportunity for more normal sized people in the mix with the pool boats. But come back to your question again, will it get into the Olympics? It's part of this ongoing dialogue that we are having with the IOC. They will be, so we have the opportunity with Congress this year. It's a virtual Congress where the member federations of World Rowing, which are the national federations, will be considering whether or not we will put coastal forward as a discipline to the IOC, which of course Council is very keen to do. So Congress will make their vote on that, I think September in the autumn, and then the IOC executive will make the decision as to which events will be in Paris 2024 in December. So that's where we've got 2 steps to go. What difference will it make for the sport? I think it will bring a lot more money into the sport in terms of professional coaches. National federations will be able to buy boats, so it will totally start to really ramp up the professional side of the sport. If it doesn't happen, I think it will continue to evolve because it's exciting, compelling, it's easy to access. It will evolve the same way I think river and lake rowing evolved before there was money in Olympic. It'll be the clubs and the individuals that pretty much pay for the growth of it. So that's where I feel. And what, if you ask me, do I think it will happen or not? I think it's really difficult to predict. There are so many political bits to the puzzle, and I couldn't tell you what's the chances are. The really interesting thing to watch out for, though, is we're Council are recommending that we put the discipline of coastal forward, and so that the format that they use can change from Olympics to Olympics depending upon the venues that the host country has. Now I know that the venues which we would share if we were to get into the games would be things like the sailing venue, the surfing venue, or the open water swimming, or the triathlon. So there's what venue sharing opportunities are there. And I know for Paris, the surfing venue is not in the equation, being in Tahiti. I did design a course. It would have been the endurance course. It wouldn't have been the beach sprints for Tahiti. But actually the venue for sailing for Paris is in Marseille. And there is, and we could run both the endurance format or the sprint format there. But there is the beach that the windsurfing is going off would be a really great beach for beach sprints. So, but we've still got a few hurdles to go through, and I shouldn't get excited.
No, that's great to hear, because I think a lot of people were getting their hopes up about Tahiti, which would have been definitely very exciting and a very nice venue to go to. But I think that Marseille sounds like it's probably, I guess, a more attractive venue for maybe the IOC as well. And that concept of having potentially a hub of water sport venues off the beach, sailing events, and then coastal rowing and some of these other things all happening in one place, I think is quite exciting as well. But thanks very much for that answer, Guin. I think that gave us a bit of insight into, I guess, where FISA's heading and some of the things that we might hear along the way over the next 6 months or so as we reach a decision from the IOC on the 2024 Olympic Games. So exciting times ahead. Okay, guys, it's now time for our Fast Five, which is the fast 5 questions that I ask all of my interviewees. So we'll go around the group. Guin, we'll start with you. What's your favourite rowing course to row on?
Favourite rowing course has to be Penrith.
Interesting. That has actually had quite a few ticks for it as well. Penrith, one of my favourites. Rio, your favourite rowing course?
Oh, my favorite rowing course is just back home because I have to see all the beautiful trees all back and forth.
I think I need to come and do some rowing there. It sounds pretty amazing.
Yeah.
Hannah, your favourite?
Well, I get Penrith because there's always an aura when you head into the course. It definitely feels pretty special when you go. But I think as an Aussie, to go past Bled or Lucerne is really, really hard. But having said that, I really like rowing up into the Narrows at the Nepean River as well. But, you know.
It is amazing. That's a pretty special part of the world, isn't it? For all of you, your top track to erg to, Guin?
Oh, blimey. I just play anything. I'm just I would never, ever stick to one song. Just anything, whatever comes on. Is that a cop-out or what?
No, that's fine. I can't listen to the same thing over and over again. I get it. Rio, what's yours?
AC/DC.
Nice.
Yeah,
that has been a popular choice.
Yeah.
That's been a popular choice amongst the people I've interviewed. Hannah?
Early days, I didn't like to listen to music. Now, different mindset, different state. I'm a bit like Guin, any 80s, 90s pop music, or my favourite track of all time is Titanium Sia.
That's a good one. Actually, that is on my exercise playlist as well. Best piece of advice that you've been given, Guin?
Best piece of advice: success is not about what you do when it's all going well. It's about what you do when it's all going wrong.
That's excellent. Rio, best piece of advice?
Best piece of advice is obedience to your own coach and everyone. Yeah.
Does Andrew tell you that? Tell it.
No,
it's not
but
true.
I have to say no, but I have to say yes, coach, every time.
Sarah, I don't think that Andrew wants to hear you say that.
Tomorrow, Andrew's going to say, Rio, you need to go train, and he'll say, no, coach. Sarah told me no. Hannah?
That it's always a choice. So if you don't like something, you don't have to do it. So it's your choice. So it's very similar to Guin's, I think.
Yes, that is a good one, especially before getting on and doing something like a 2K erg test. I'm choosing to do this. What is wrong with me? The career highlight today, Guin?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for me, I often get asked that question because, of course, I've got quite a few world records from ocean rowing. But to me, there is nothing quite like spending 10 years of your life pursuing a dream which comes down to, 7 minutes, and then to have that opportunity to stand on the Olympic medal podium, having achieved your dream, and the overriding sensation, not necessarily being joy, but relief that you haven't wasted 10 years of your life. But to me, that still remains. And of course, in a couple of weeks, on the 24th of September, is our 20th anniversary. So my sister, who was in the crew, Gillian Lindsay and Catherine Granger, we're going to try and see whether we can get together. So yeah, absolutely remains to this day.
It's unbelievable that we're at 20 years for Sydney. I mean, I think for Australians, it was such an important and such a special time. And for a whole generation or several generations, I think some of those, highlights from the games, particularly, I was talking to John Coates a couple of weeks ago, and, Kathy Freeman lighting the flame and winning the 400, and the beach volleyball, Kerry Price and Natalie Cook winning their gold medals, all of these, pivotal sporting moments in Australian history that came out of the Sydney Olympics. So it's just unbelievable to think that we're 20 years on. Rio. Sorry, Guin, what were you saying?
No, what was amazing was there were all the big moments as well. But if you can imagine, I think Australia, you redefined what it was to be a volunteer. You redefined about how the relationship between the athletes and the volunteers. And, I just remember it was like we wanted to go out because we had crazy training programs. We wanted to go out in the dark. And if it had been most countries, they would have said, it's dark, you can't go out, bang. Whereas it's, no, wait there, we'll get you a light or this. And they just made everything happen. And, I think, definitely, your volunteers redefined what it was to the experience of the games.
Guin, that's a lovely thing to say, and that makes you really proud to be an Australian to hear that. That's awesome.
2032. Rio, can you tell us what your career highlight to date is?
Okay. We have there's a children's book coming out already. And it's entitled Tough to Mass, it's extremely tough. So it's a children's book, and I got to feature inside. And
wow.
With rowing, I too with no shirts on, but they have to color. They have to color out all the things because it's a children's book. So it's now coming out. It's a popular book. So. And then I think Vanuatu is a little island, and I've been in the paper like 20 times and then now yesterday they asking me what is coming up in rowing in the paper, so I don't know what the answer is, but I'll maybe say something, so maybe pop up in the paper again.
Yeah, certainly. Well, I mean, your results have been completely exceptional to date so far, and there's so many highlights that you've had, but I think some of your big highlights are yet to come, with hopefully the Olympic Games next year, and then of course the Coastal Championships next year as well. So we look forward to following your journey. And Hannah, for you, what's your highlight to date?
I think I'll have to turn it around to Guin, and obviously my Olympic experience in 2012 in London, but on the flip side, Guin, I came 5th and your GB girls came 1st. So, you were saying how you always came 5th. I think I was just too old, left my run too late. I was too old to keep going for that bit longer. But, wonderful Sophie Hosking, and, who I work with on the Athletes Commission. That was one of your 3 women's gold. So,
yeah, an incredible performance from that lightweight women's double. Coached by an Aussie though, so that says it all, doesn't it?
There's always going to be Aussie influence there somewhere.
I know I do a pretty good job, I think, of turning it all around to have an Aussie tilt in all of these interviews. But the final question of the interview for all of you, and I'm always surprised at how vivid these memories are, no matter how far past retirement the athlete may be or former athlete may be, but the hardest session you have ever done, Guin.
Okay, so hardest session I've ever done was on the last session of a 330-kilometer week. Okay, and it was 24 individual 250-meter starts. Yeah, and you had to row the 16K, and it took 16K to do it. So pretty much your average row rate was 38:40 for. Yeah, it was brutal, but that was about the hardest session we did, and then of course we then started tapering into the Olympic Games, and that was probably took me 10 years to be able to do that single training session.
I'm not surprised it's etched in the memory. Rio, the hardest session that you've ever had to do?
Oh, the hardest. I think everyone's the hard. Yes, it's the 500 pieces and 1,000 pieces. You have to go flat out. That is the worst one. I don't like, but just get through it. It was done. Yeah, the 500 pieces is the hard one for me.
Definitely a bit like Guin and all of those race pace pairs, they are pretty tough, aren't they?
Yeah.
Hannah, for you, hardest session you've ever done? The classic Zoom trick, you're on mute.
I'm a bit like Rio, and very unlike you, Sarah, that loves the short, sharp. They're my least favourites, is the high intensity. So 500s were my least favourite, and I remember doing 10 of them side by side with other crews, sort of first 500 off, second 500 off, final 5, and doing that 10 times. So yeah, that was all that ergo that we used to do, Sarah, that we labelled ergo of death. I can't
Ergo of death. I still tell the kids about that. It's legend. I think someone got shirts made up for that, didn't they?
I think so.
Yes. Oh, those were the days.
Long ago.
Well, guys, it's been such a pleasure to talk to you, and I really appreciate you talking about your coastal rowing experiences. And I think there'll be a lot of people watching this with interest, because it really is such an exciting discipline. And one of the, I guess, the biggest changes that we've probably faced in our sport, which has such a long history and tradition globally, and to see this new and exciting discipline really starting to come into its own now, and potentially being included in an upcoming Olympic Games, I think is very exciting, not only for the discipline of coastal rowing, but for the sport of rowing globally. So thank you so much for joining me and sharing your expertise and experiences.